to Hospitality Today Live. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I'm Deborah Gardner, your host, here advocating all the wonderful professionals in the hospitality industry and their voice to be heard throughout the world. So I want to say thank you so much for being here and joining us. We are just thrilled that we have a special guest for you here today, because each week we actually invite the most experienced, the dedicated, the ones that have the expertise in so many different areas, so that we all can learn and grow together. And today, I am so honored. I have the great pleasure to introducing to you MaryAnne Bobrow with Bobrow and Associates, a longtime meeting and event professional, and now, of course, has her own business as well. So I'd like to introduce to you here right now, and therefore, let's bring her on. And we want to say hello to her at this time. So MaryAnne, there you are. Hi, MaryAnne.
Hi, Deborah. How are you?
Welcome, welcome. I can spend all day talking about you and the wonderful things that you have done in this industry. The hospitality industry icon is what I call you, because you are so brilliant. I follow you on all your social media links. I just like to stay in touch with you, and you're so gracious to always talk to me at the same time. But I want our viewers, those that are watching you today, I want them to know a little bit about you, even though if we can do the whole segment on this. Tell them, who is MaryAnne?
Well, not to take up the entire time of the show, very briefly, I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. I've contributed a lot to various of the hospitality organizations. I do presentations all over the country and even outside the country. I love to write, and I write articles for the industry publications. I've owned my own business for more than 16 years now, and it's really, when I say that, I have to do a double check. It's like, really? 16 years? But it's true. And I also am a certified association executive. I've worked primarily with a lot of nonprofit organizations. I'm a certified meeting professional. I have a certificate in meeting management. I used to be a hospitality educator, but after 10 years, when UNLV really lost its funding in an economic downturn, all of their adjunct professors were left go. And pretty much that's when I stopped teaching in academia and went more the conference industry event avenues to get the message out on a variety of topics. My personal favorites are risk management, anything to do with risk management, the events of 2001, which we just remembered this week, really heightened my interest in emergency preparedness, crisis communications, and the like. And because of a connection and collaboration with John Howe of Howe and Hutton, other attorneys, other professionals, I also have a high percentage of interest in what's going on in contracts and contract management. That led me and you to a conversation where pretty much we were looking at each other and scratching our heads saying, whoops, did we forget about this issue? And that pretty much takes us to where we are today, I think, Deborah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There is a whole long list, and you're absolutely right. The conversation you and I had recently is what sparked this interview today, because you and I both thought that this was very, very important to bring to the table. And before we get into that topic, and letting everybody know what we are talking about. What have you been doing during all this craziness? Has there been anything exciting going on with you? Everybody wants to know what everybody else is doing, but I would imagine you've been pretty busy.
I have been pretty busy. A lot of it has been on the volunteer side. As you know, all businesses were affected during the past 6, 8 months, whatever it is now. One of the things you do is, of course, you lose track of time. I do have to look at the calendar to figure out what day of the week it is and where I'm supposed to be. I I've watched and I've listened on the various listservs and community event sites as we look at an industry that is now in great turmoil, has to learn yet new skills in order to be in the industry and how to adapt to changes that we can't even contemplate. And that's probably the one of the most prevalent things right now. I always like to say my crystal ball is broken and I can't find anyone to repair it. And that's pretty much the way I think. But I think all of us in this industry, whether we're speakers or managers or suppliers, we all have to start looking at ourselves, what we're doing in life. And as we know, many people are furloughed, others have been uh, permanently removed from their positions. Others are being asked to do far more than they should be asked to do, and they're doing it to be in a survival mode. And all of those things lead me to believe personally that no matter how experienced you are, no matter how many certifications you have to continue to explore, to reach new heights, to learn new competencies. I remember when I first received my CMP designation, I think the exam took in how many cups of coffee were in a gallon and that sort of thing. If you look at that exam today, you know that it's gotten to such a high level that it doesn't even look anything like what that exam looked like when I took it. I think it was 2002, some 18 years ago. And that's a good thing. I vowed right then that I would never let mine lapse because I didn't want to have to take a test again. So what I'm thinking now, what I'm seeing now is I urge our audience, whether you're live or whether you're going to watch this on recording, learn what's going on, adapt, take on new skills so that when we finally get past what we're currently enduring, that you are prepared and you have the skills, particularly if you're furloughed. If you furloughed, you definitely have time. Learn what's going on, learn about hybrid events, learn about virtual events, learn about what you need to do, prepare for it, get your checklists ready. Do you know how to tell your speaker what to do and when? Do you know what do you need to do in contracts and everything like that? There's so much that we obviously cannot do much of anything in the time allotted to us today, and I suspect we'll do more in the future. But I think what I want to see right now, and I think what we want to talk about right now, is that there's an element in contracts that we believe people may be overlooking. And that's where I really want to get to today, because I know in force majeure, I've heard from attorneys in the industry that people are just they're giving into things they don't need to give into. They're not protecting their organization well. And we have to start looking beyond just the venue and the organizer. We have to look at all of our suppliers. And I thought we should start with our speakers because it's an often forgotten element. Usually it's, yeah, we do speaker management and we tell them what to do and we give them a little advance on how to work in a specific platform or on stage. We tell them not to sell their own books because that's not in their contract. And pretty much that's all we've done. We haven't gone out there and really explored with them whether we're on level ground based on any contracts that have been entered into, or more importantly, whether there's been a contract ended into. And I think that's where we ought to begin our journey. And that's why I say there's probably going to be another aspect to it. I say that specifically because the other element that enters into speaker contracts is that of the Speakers Bureau. There are all kinds of speakers bureaus that are representing well-known speakers and lesser well-known speakers and some up-and-coming speakers. And all of those elements really need to be tied down and locked down in a contract. You know, I hate to use the word pandemic, and this is the only time during this session I will use it, but the pandemic taught us that we need to look at contracts in a way we've not looked at before, and we need to look at them more specifically.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought all that up, MaryAnne, because let's dive deeper into this because this is, like you said, it's going to make a huge impact on the future of our industry. And you know, I have to chuckle though when you're talking about CMP. Oh my gosh, I remember taking that test. I can't even imagine what it's like. It's probably a law test today, but such a needed process that EIC coordinates. So I totally agree with that. And the other thing that you said that was so important was what Sheriff Karamat with PCMA said. He said, we're not rushing to meetings, we're rushing to education, to educate ourselves. And so when you mention about new skills and new talents that we need to discover, that's exactly in line what Sheriff was saying as well. So kudos to you for bringing that to our attention. So now let's dive into what you mentioned, the contract clause, which is called force majeure. Now, this is one of the most misrepresented clauses in the contract for decades now. I think the only people that really understand it are the lawyers. And we're not lawyers, you and I, but we do have an understanding on it, and we feel that since things are changing and we're in a crisis of a crisis, we'll never know when a crisis is going to come back again. And that clause is going to be more of a stipulation and more of a standard than ever before. So can you share with our viewers what is a force majeure? And what was it like? What's it look like today? And why is it really important for our industry to really gravitate and understand this to full force?
Well, before I get into that, I do want to make a statement that neither of us are lawyers. We don't play them on television. But we do know a lot of lawyers. We talk to a lot of lawyers. And I would guarantee you, if you put 5 of them in a room together, they would probably not even agree on every element of force majeure. You know, you hear words like impracticability and all those ones that are really tough to roll off the tongue. And you would get different perspectives based upon what your meeting is about, how you selected everybody. A force majeure incident is one that really got its name as starting as an act of God, and then insurance got in the way, and 2001 happened. Tornadoes, the volcano eruption in the country I can't name. But all of these things disrupted the world in such a ways that we could not perform an event because it was impracticable, it was impossible, and the words keep getting bandied around depending on who you talk to, which lawyer you talk to, and you really need to trust the people that you believe in to get you the right direction on a contract and what your rights are and what the rights of the other party concerned are. So force majeure, we've always talked about, and in my mind, and uh, maybe in others, I expect that's true. All we ever thought about was the venue, the hotel, the convention center, the conference center. Little did we think much about the other suppliers that contribute to the success of our organization and of our event. Those would be audiovisual people, general service contractors, um, DMCs, transportation people, and the list goes on and on. And that list needs to include speakers. And one of those things that we haven't been paying a great deal attention to is the contracts that are signed with speakers, or whether there actually is a contract with the speaker, and what happens in the event of a force majeure. So when Deborah and I were talking about a week ago, we said, shouldn't there be contracts that speak to what happens in various phases of a contract that gets affected by a incident beyond your control, whether it be natural, whether it be man-made, or whatever that might be. And we have now a very large expanse of what those could be. Um, I'm sitting in the middle of forest fires, not really in the middle of the fire, but the smoke is pretty bad and our air is pretty unhealthy here. Um, Others are right in the middle of the fires. The East Coast is in the middle of hurricane season, and we're all facing these incidents. And if we had face to face events coming up, then certainly all of those would be affected. We now know, looking at the industry surveys, that most people and a very few um, are waiting at least until 2021 to do events. There aren't that many events on the books for the rest of the year. And even though they're on the books for the rest of the year, there's nothing that says that they too can't be canceled based on whatever information we're finding out. And that information changes by the day. And that's the problem. That's why we don't have a crystal ball. That's why we can't do any true forecasting. All we do is go by our gut, what's happening out there. So, what's important is to look at your contract. You have time to do that now. You're not sourcing a lot of meetings. Go ahead and take a look at all your existing contracts. Go ahead and take a look at whatever sample contracts that you have, and that includes your speaker contract. What does that contract say specifically about the speaker, the payments, the expenses incurred, how those expenses are incurred, all of those kinds of things. Let's face it, if you're doing a face to face meeting, you have to worry about the transportation for the speaker, the air travel or car travel, whatever that may be, the hotel lodging, all of those kinds of things go into it, and they get reimbursed to a speaker, and reasonably so. I mean, the speaker will always put in a great deal more time than their time on stage with that. And they need to be compensated for that. But should they get an entire speaker fee if an event isn't happening? You know, we need to have conversations about that, and we need to invite those speakers in to have a really fair conversation on what we come up with. So Deborah and I have come up with some clauses that we think are a basis for opening a conversation. Notice I'm not saying these are the ones we should use, because I'm sure if we had 10 more people look at them, they'd have other ideas that are very good ideas um, to include in this. It's always been my belief in this industry, if you have integrity, if you have credibility amongst your peers, then they're more likely to work openly with you. I have suppliers that I count as really good best friends, that I haven't done business with in 10, 15 years. But guess what? In current times, we're doing video chats every so often just to stay connected. You stay connected with the people that you care about and that you respect, and that respect you as well. And I think that's the underlying basis of the conversation we should be having right now. What if an event cancels? What if an event postpones? What if it becomes hybrid? Is that speaker willing and able to make that transition, or does that speaker need to acquire more skills right now, to make that jump over to virtual? I taught for 10 years at UNLV. I know what it's like talking to a blank wall, and not having the abilities we have now. We didn't do Zoom type meetings. We didn't do platforms like the one we're on today, where we talk to each other physically. We had to use a chat forum to do that. And we'd have class, and then we'd have questions after class. But it's a different environment. When you do a webinar, you are talking to a camera, and hopefully you can remember to talk to the camera. Sometimes I do forget, but uh, you really need to be comfortable. You need to speak in a normal voice. You can't run it too fast without watching your clock and knowing that, oh my gosh, you've got 15 minutes left and you're done talking. Then there's a bunch of blank space, especially if no one asks a comment. So, postponement, cancellation, hybrid, are your speakers prepared, and are you prepared to have that conversation with your speakers? Do you know what the requirements you're going to have? And there's nothing that says, as an industry, we can't pull that together. We don't have to have 72 versions of what a speaker checklist would be for a canceled meeting, a postponed meeting. What if the meeting's postponed and the speaker can't make it on the date? Well, that's going to be a cancellation. How does that reflected in your contract? And are you able to change that postponed date? Who knows? There's so many variables that go into that.
Yeah, because I have to agree with you, MaryAnne, because I believe that as an industry, we actually sucked this time around on
We do.
how we dealt with contracts. Because as a speaker, myself and you as well, the lodging you have to consider, the fee, the deposits, the airfares. There's so many elements to a contract. And I believe as an industry, we failed in that area because everybody was scrambling around on the speaker side and the meeting side. What do we do? How do we handle this? And you would think we would have learned earlier because this is not our first rodeo. Yes, this is a different animal. This was a beast. But I agree with you. We really need to be prepared. And I believe this document that you and I started working on is very important to get that conversation going. And it looks like so far what we've done is we've talked about virtual, hybrid, cancellation, and postponement. But like you said, there's other elements to this force majeure. And as a matter of fact, the force majeure I call it's a dirty word, but I don't want it to be a dirty word anymore. I want us to love this contract clause because this is not going to be our last rodeo. Those of you that are watching right now, welcome. And if you have any additional questions for MaryAnne, please go into the chat, and I would be happy to ask those for you on your behalf for MaryAnne, because I tell you what, again, she's my hospitality icon, and there is no one better that would have the answers to what you might want to know about. So I will take a look at that. But in the meantime, MaryAnne, where can they get this article and this document to help with this process and this communication going forward?
Well, first of all, if they're going to be viewing this conversation after the actual live event is held, they should look both to Facebook and to LinkedIn, where we'll post the article for them. And if they have questions, they should ask us in those forums what they can and should be doing. I know as a speaker that when I look at contracts, I have my red pen handy, and I know how much effort and time I put in to preparing a presentation. Even if it's not a PowerPoint, I'm tending to shy away from PowerPoint and doing more conversational like we're doing today, and then coming up with some takeaways that people watching can take away, like the article we wrote and will publish as soon as this ends. But I know the speaker puts in a lot of time, and oftentimes I will see things in contract like the organizer now owns this product. Oh no, this is my product. This is what I worked on. This is what I put my lifeblood in, and I will share it with whomever I wish to share it with. It doesn't become property of the organization unless they choose to purchase it. That would be a different story. Every speaker puts a great deal of time into what they do, and I want to be sure that those speakers understand we're not talking about boxing speakers into a corner. We're talking about having a honest and real conversation about what speaker contracts should look like, and that includes moving forward going into the added element of being represented by an agent or a speakers bureau. And those are things that we didn't even talk about yet because we knew that had to have other people in that conversation as well. There's so many elements to each phase of this that will there be a partial payment? Will you be paid the same for a virtual as you do for a face to face? Well, if there's no travel expenses, then there's no travel expenses. But you did put the same amount of time into that presentation. And I would go further and say that you probably put more time into it to adjust it to a virtual environment if it's being moved, or a hybrid environment.
Right, and
I was
we're hearing a lot of this on chat of what you're just saying right now. As a matter of fact, Teresa Gittimore really wrapped up what you were saying. Virtual speaking engagements need to be engaging. You have to have the multi-cameras, the lighting, the sound, video background. I mean, it just, the tech business, we become producers in a sense. And so she's so right in that area. And, Lisa Patrick totally agrees with that. Who's an entrepreneur herself, that these type of events, it has to be a partnership between the speaker and the meeting and an event professional, no doubt. I do have a question here that has to do with education, which I believe you could definitely answer because you come from that background, and that comes from Lisa Raymond. She's saying, is edge learning similar to transferable skills, or just shifting, your education and experience? What do you think about that, MaryAnne?
I think that we are going into a shift, much as we did about 10 years ago when for the meeting organizer, your capabilities and your competencies became strategic. They used to be very tactical. When I first started out, it was, how many cups of coffee and how many glasses of wine to a bottle and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, you still have to know that. But the smart people moved way above that level and moved more into the strategic realm. And what your first post said was so true. And that means if you're on a platform, I had this question. A colleague and friend called me last night and said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, you need to know what it is you're doing. Are you having a conversation for 25? Do they all have to be interactive? There's so many pieces just to selecting a platform. You can't not go on a listserv and put out there, hey, I'm doing a meeting for 100 to 300 people. Right there is a wild, really a wild gap. If you go up to 1,000, I've been on events that are 15,000 people. If you watched the Easter service from Italy with Bocelli, I could be wrong, but I think there were upwards of 20 million people. Now, that was not interactive, it was just one way, but it was a beautiful event that was held on Easter Sunday. So, what is it, the event you're going to have? And this is what I'm talking about in really ramping up your skills and incorporating the hybrid, incorporating the virtual into your bag of tricks. You need to be more expansive, more versatile, and more well educated. You just can't go out and say, oh, what did you guys use? And 5 people say XYZ company, but it's not the right company for you and for your platform. Maybe it doesn't allow engagement. Maybe it does, and maybe you have 50 or 100 little tiny boxes on your screen now. Is that going to be what's going to engage your people? Is that going to be anything that allows them to take away the education they need to take away? And that means you have to engage them both in your content and in your platform that enable them to ask questions, get questions answered. I know for myself, whenever I'm doing any sort of a virtual presentation, I always ask the moderator, and yes, there should be a moderator for every virtual event. That there needs to be a producer, and that producer can also be the moderator, but you've got to have both. And that's the one that's going to take care of all of the technical issues. That's the one that's going to help you to make that a successful event. I did an MPI Florida virtual event on emergency planning a couple of weeks ago, and we ran out of time. There were so many questions. We absolutely ran out of time. And one of them, I got most of them answered at the end of the session, but there was one that I just got the information on that I will have to answer post event. And that's what's most important is the attendee going to get the answers they need to take that information and execute it flawlessly for whomever they're producing the event for. That's what's key. And to make sure everyone is happy and wants to return.
Yep, absolutely. So on that point, there was a great question that I even want to know as a speaker, and it actually comes from Lisa Patrick, and it's what every speaker needs to know. And I know you have the answer to this. What is the most common mistake a speaker makes in the contract. And I know you being on the speaking side as well and on the meeting side, I'm sure you have heard or have experienced what's the most, biggest mistake, most frustrating for the meetings and event professionals.
Well, I'm going to make this statement for everybody out there listening or who will listen. And Lisa, I do mean this sincerely. Event organizers, suppliers, speakers, especially ones that are seasoned, where it's not their first rodeo, they tend to start reading a sentence and think they know the end of the sentence without reading it. And that is the most common mistake people make. It's not a specific clause, although, as we talked about a few of them, what about your transportation fees? How close to the event are you canceling? Or, is your airplane ticket refundable? Is your hotel without penalty? All of those kinds of things play into it. And those should all be spelled out in your contract. But the most common mistake is not reading each clause thoroughly. That's when you get the red pen out and say, no, you're not owning my content. No, you don't have rights to reproduce it without my permission that you reproduce it. Again, what I do, as all speakers do, my content is original. I don't pull it from other people. I do a lot of research, and that research may come from a lot of organizations and a lot of people, but what comes out is my presentation or my conversation with the audience as to what I'd like them to know, and and making sure that what I present to them is what they came to hear and what takeaways I've given them. I alluded to the MPI session in Florida a couple of weeks ago, uh, and I had at the end of it, I also incorporated a little bit of resources for them on hybrid platforms, on virtual platforms, on other resources that they would need. And that's what I like to do when I make presentations. I want people to go away knowing that they now have information that they can act upon and some ideas on how they should approach the organization of the event, the contract, all of that kind of thing. So, A, that enhances them in their particular job and their value to their organization. And it also makes them feel confident that they're able to move over to that level and do a very successful event, whether it's face to face, hybrid, or virtual.
So do you think that speakers should be spending all the dollars to get that virtual event up and running in their home studio, which I believe home studio is kind of a odd word. Maybe it should be remote studio, remote business. But I'm getting a lot of feedback and input on the chat about that, because there are speakers out there that are spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Is that really necessary? Should speakers have that much control over the production of it? What is your viewpoint and your opinion and experience in that area?
For some people, it is necessary. If you look at the higher paid keynote speakers, the ones that literally are doing no business right now, and they're in the same boat as the rest of us. It's like I finally came to the realization a couple of weeks ago when I saw on Facebook the red alert, which said there would, the entertainment industry is as severely affected as we are. I saw an article this morning or yesterday uh, that the Gates Foundation had published, and the figures, I did post it on Facebook, by the way, the figures on the losses to the industry and to um, people's jobs is just staggering. So, is it sometimes necessary for a speaker like me? I'm not going to go invest thousands of dollars in uh, equipment and have a separate room or office or whatever to create a studio environment. I do a lot of speaking, but I do them within the platforms that the organizations are using, and I'm fine with that. I do believe that a lot of speakers should consider pre recording their events so there are no technical issues because it's being played. And then the speaker has the ability to answer the audience in real time when the questions are being asked. I attended one where that was happening. I think um, it was Skift or event manager that did it. And I watched these presentations, and there was no way, if we hadn't been told that they were remote, that they actually had pre-recorded their session. And the session came off flawlessly. So for the planners out there, that's something I think you really do need to investigate. For the speakers out there, I think you should do that as well. Pre-recording the session and then being able to interact on the chat function of the platform with the audience can make it a really value added item, especially if it's a virtual event. Hybrid, I hope, has come a long way since I did hybrid events where the camera was hiding way in the back of the room, and in my ear, I'm being told, look at the camera when I want to look at my audience in front of me and interact with them. I'm sure, like anybody else who got up in front of an audience for the first time, you took uh, the tip that you should look over their heads. I don't look over their heads anymore. Haven't for a very long time. I look at the faces. I see where comprehension is happening or puzzlement is happening. Then I know I need to take a little deeper dive because maybe I'm at a level a little too advanced for the audience I'm presenting to. So you have to be savvy about what you're doing. You can't do a canned presentation.
Right.
And that is something with a virtual audience, you don't see that face reaction.
Right.
And that face can tell you 1,000 things.
Absolutely.
Will virtual have a place? Yes. Will it replace face to face? In my opinion, no.
Nope.
We still are an industry of huggers.
Exactly. And we're doing a lot of virtual hugging going on here, but like my husband said, I'm in such a kissy huggy industry.
Well, we are. And the ironic part of it is that hugging isn't fake.
Right?
It's real.
It's genuine.
It is genuine. And, I want to get back to that time. I miss having adult libations with my friends after a day's education. I miss the fun. I miss the stories. I don't miss the cigar smoke, but that's another story.
Right. Well, and I was just going to ask you what it is that you miss about the industry, and you just answered that. So why don't we close today? Again, I can talk to you all day long about this, but I'm just so excited about this opportunity to work with you on the dirty word, force majeure. And where can everybody get that article and document it again?
I'm going, and you will also paste it both on Facebook and on LinkedIn as soon as the session is done and I get a drink of water because this smoke is killing me.
So everybody connect with MaryAnne and myself on LinkedIn. and it will be posted there in another hour or two. And then join in. We've got to get this conversation going because it is a very important contract clause. So one more piece of advice from the industry icon, MaryAnne Bobrow. What would be that advice that you would like to give to our hospitality peeps on what to look forward to as we get closer to, instead of the now normal, but more of the new normal, because we know it's not going to go back. What is that off the wall? What is that one piece of advice you give to speakers, to those that work from the back of the house to the front of the house, to the leaders of the industry, coming from your brilliancy?
So what I would tell anybody in the industry is you are in charge of your own future. And if you're just sitting at home, not helping yourself, go out and volunteer, deliver meals to the elderly, whatever it might be. Go and learn more about what a virtual meeting is. Ramp up your checklists and your contracts. Make sure any of your future contracts are reviewed by an attorney to ensure that what you have in force majeure is effective for your future contracts. Talk to your insurance broker about the cost of force majeure and event cancellation insurance. That's another huge issue that is on the horizon. I remember after 2001, it was there were two contracts, insurance policies out there. One excluded it if terrorism occurred 25 miles away from your event, and the other one had some different clause in it. So not all clauses are alike, even in the insurance industry. You take control of your own life and push yourself forward to learn all of the new things you've got to learn. Because even if we go back to face, there are going to be instances where it's more economical once you get your platforms up and running to run some added things. If you look at the nonprofit world, they have pretty much gone silent on education because it's too difficult, especially if you have certification programs, which people need to have. There's all kinds of other elements that roll into the current situation. And I will leave you with two very important thoughts. We are not in a new normal. We are in a new reality, and we're going to have to learn to live with it. We're not going back. We have to move forward with what we're dealt with right now and that hope we can rebuild. The other thing is, I don't believe in social distancing. There's nothing social about it. It's physical distancing. And I think for all of us, if we are going to a face to face event of any kind, we simply need to adhere to all of the security and safety requirements that are out there without arguing with people about putting on a mask. Are masks comfortable? No, they're very uncomfortable. We all know that. But we also know that there is a protection for other people if you have a mask on. If those people don't put masks on, then they are in effect putting you in jeopardy because they're not putting uh, putting the safety and security uh, protocols in place and adhering to them. So we all have to just get ourselves used to it and move forward and work together. Um, when we start doing a lot of contracts again, we've all lost a lot of money. We've all we know what's happening with hotels. Some will never return. Um, we all also have to be ethical and we have to be fair. And we have to be fair to all of our suppliers and we have to be fair to our speakers as well.
Wise advice and tons of it. I cannot thank you enough, MaryAnne, for being our special guest here
My
today.
pleasure.
You really showcased a lot of great new information, and I hope all our viewers out there have learned a ton from this woman. She is a brilliancy of an icon in the industry, in my eyes, and hopefully in yours as well. Again, thank you so much for being with us. And I tell you what, the comments are just flooded. We're going to have you back.
Well, I'm always pleased to be anywhere you are, Deborah, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg on this conversation. I really do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll have to revisit on this and see where this goes, and hopefully everyone from the meeting side to the speaker side embrace it, because that's what it's all about. We've got to like you said, this is our new reality, and I love that. And that's where we're at. So we might as well embrace it all together. Thank you very much, MaryAnne.
And let's hope that our speakers, our suppliers, our organizers all band together and collaborate on what's best for the industry. Thank you, Deborah. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely.
And good night to all of you, or good afternoon to all of you, or good morning to all of you. I'm still morning.
Exactly. Thanks, MaryAnne. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's segment with MaryAnne Bobrow. Again, what a brilliant icon in the industry. She's full of all kinds of information and experience and expertise, and it was just such an honor to have her on the show today. And I hope that you have enjoyed this another segment of Hospitality Today Live, and you'll go to our Facebook page and like it and enjoy next week as well. Who's our guest next week? Well, we have Joseph Lara, who happens to be a founder and managing director of the Knowledge Exchange. I mean, as long as I've been in this industry, I'm still learning about other hospitality peeps out there. And Joseph has the Knowledge Exchange, which actually is one of the fastest growing invitation only hospitality trade shows for the hospitality industry. And he's also the co-creator for SaveTheMeetings.org. SaveTheMeetings.org campaign, as well as the executive producer and creator of Mission Critical. And I want to know more about this, because apparently it draws 12,000, and I'm saying 12,000 of senior level meeting and event professionals. So we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, same time, with Joseph Lara. So don't miss this conversation next Tuesday on Hospitality Today Live. And in the spirit of hospitality, I'm Deborah Gardner, your host. And now go make it a very productive and successful week on your own. And we'll see you again next week.